Live from a basement in Dubuque, Iowa.
I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
30 minutes from the Field of Dreams and 4 hours from the closest professional sports team.
It's not a lie if you believe it.
On the banks of the Mississippi River.
I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
It's the Degenerate Sports Betting Show with Matthew Freedman.
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
And now your host, Matthew Freedman.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Freedman, Matt F. the Oracle. Welcome to the Degenerate Sports Betting Show, brought to you by Bets TV and sponsored by the FTN Network, where you can get all the season-long and daily fantasy and sports betting content your degenerate heart desires, including my fantasy football write-ups and all of my NFL sides, totals, and player props. Use a highly original promo code Freedman for 20% off your FTN subscription. That is Freedman for 20% off at FTN. Thanks for checking out the show. Subscribe to the Best TV channel on YouTube and rate, review, and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. All right, it is Tuesday, and for today's episode, we are talking NBA, and we have on a very, very special guest, a guy I used to work with at two different companies. Now he has gone his own way, and he is the Underdog fantasy director, Justin Phan. It is fantastic to have you. Of course, we worked together at Fantasy Labs, where you ran the NBA product there. You were the minutes master, and now you are doing your thing at Underdog. How's it going?
Doing well, man. NBA season has been exceptionally crazy these last couple of weeks, trying to get my bearings and keep up with everything. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
So before we started, producer Tom was talking about, COVID protocols. He was wondering if we might be getting close to another sports shutdown. And you started talking about the state of all of this in the NBA. Give us your thoughts. How is everything in terms of COVID impacting what it is that we are seeing on the court? How close do you think we might be to an actual shutdown?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we're seeing whole teams getting affected, right? We got the Bulls with 10 players in the protocols recently. The Nets got hit with 5 players in the protocols. This morning we got news of them. So the problem is when we're seeing huge chunks of players on teams getting hit with COVID and not having enough players to even pull out, the 8 available that they need to get games going. So I think we're getting to a point where it might be a tipping point, and we might, be approaching that area where, we might have to consider, potentially, postponing more games at least, and then eventually a shutdown potentially.
All right. So that, heavy news, way to bring us down, Jay Fan. Okay. So the NBA season, it's underway. And at this point we have, I wouldn't say like a strong sense of who the great and horrible teams are, but we're starting to get a sense of how everything is unfolding. And I'm curious right now, if you had to pick 2 teams for the NBA finals, who would those teams be?
Yeah, I picked the Warriors and the Bucks, and on the Warriors side, they have the league's best adjusted net rating right now. They've been the best team so far, and the more important thing is they have legitimately passed to improvement. Like Clay is coming back in a couple of weeks. He hasn't played a single minute this season. James Wiseman will come back soon after that. He hasn't played at all this season. And you have the improvement of rookies. They have Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. They've been like in and out of the rotation. They haven't played big roles, but they're going to get better as well. They're rookies. They're young kids, right? And they unquestionably have the league's best defense, and their depth is insane. Their bench is a huge asset for them. And when Clay comes back, Jordan Poole, who's been starting next to Steph Curry, he'll move into that 6-man role. So their bench becomes even stronger. They have options on their bench galore: Iguodala, Gary Payton II, Bielitsa, OPJ, Wiseman, Damian Lee, JTA. And those number of options also give them a lot of flexibility. They can go really big, they can go small. Their best lineup, their closing lineup is going to be Draymond at center. So I think their biggest competition is still going to be the Phoenix Suns. We saw those teams match up a couple times already this season. We'll see them again on Christmas. And out east, I'm going to still go back to Milwaukee. What we've seen so far hasn't really been any sort of representation of how good they can be. Brook Lopez has been sidelined with a back injury for a while now. Chris Middleton, Giannis, Drew, they've all missed time. DiVincenzo hasn't played yet. So, we've only seen, I don't know, like 10 or 11 games where their full team has been together, and they've only lost one or two of those to this point. So, I think their biggest competition is still Brooklyn. The Kyrie situation is still hanging. Apparently he's getting close-ish to play, but it's still going to be a bit of some growing pains there integrating back in the lineup. And I don't really understand how he'll look when he returns, because he's been off for so long. So I'm just going to take the team with the continuity, the team that I know that doesn't have those kind of fit issues potentially, and go back to Milwaukee in the East.
All right, one team you didn't mention in the West was the Lakers, who obviously are going through their own issues. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just have a huge fit issue with Russ. I mean, I think it's become apparent that he's a terrible fit next to LeBron. I think we've had decades worth of data on LeBron and how you maximize him as you surround him with shooters, right? And Russ is literally the opposite, the worst possible fit. A guy that really needs the ball, that cannot play off the ball and shoot, and that isn't exceptionally good at defense either. So it becomes a Russ problem really, where I don't even know if they're in game 7 of the playoff series, should you have him on the court down the stretch, during crunch time. Like, it becomes that serious an issue where I think he disrupts their flow, and limits their ceiling to a pretty significant extent. And I think their supporting players, they've had injuries. Ariza's been out, Talon Horton-Tucker's been out. They've had to start guys like Kent Bazemore, DeAndre Jordan. So the supporting cast hasn't been great either. So yeah, I think it really becomes an issue of solving Russ. Becomes less of an issue when LeBron or Anthony Davis is off the court or hurt, when he can kind of take on that more of a lead ball role. But when both those guys are healthy, it becomes a question of, what does Russ do now? Like, he can't just kind of stand there, while the other guys do their thing. And, that's not really how you maximize him either.
All right, so let's get into the 3-game slate. You mentioned a number of teams there. Only 3 games, but we've got some good teams playing tonight. We've got the Nets going, we have the Warriors, and we have the Suns playing. Now, from a basketball perspective, kind of different from the sports betting perspective, but from a basketball perspective, which of these matchups are you most wanting to see tonight?
I mean, it has to be the Warriors game. Steph is 1 away from the record. Most career threes, trying to break the record tonight. So that's going to be the marquee game. That's the TNT game. That's the one that everybody's going to be appealed to. And that's really the game I like too, from a betting perspective as well.
Okay, well, let's get into it from the betting perspective. What do you like about it?
Yeah, so I like Knicks +5. I still like the value there. There's 4.5 at some place. I think that's fine too. The issue with the Warriors, their plane had a mechanical issue last night, so they couldn't take off to New York until 10:30 this morning. So they'll land like a little bit after noon and won't get into the hotel until like 1 or 2 p.m. So you're getting to the hotel at 1 or 2 p.m. Tip-offs at 7:30. And this is the second leg of a road back-to-back for them as well. They played in Indiana last night. They played a really physical game where they had to grind out a win. So this is just a really tough spot for them. And, athletes are creatures of habit. Like, the late arrival, might not seem like a big deal to some, but it really impacts their pregame routines, the body work that they get in before the games, naps, which are really important for athletes as well, meals and et cetera. So there's a lot of things that goes into this. So yeah, just a tough spot overall for them. Second leg of a row back-to-back, having plane issues, a really late arrival into New York today.
Justin, you know this. I don't know much about the NBA, but from having followed you, with, kind of watching the spots that you tend to bet, how it is that you evaluate games, what you just told me, that feels like a classic J fan type of spot of like a team on the second leg of a back-to-back with mechanical issues on the plane, arriving late, like all of these off-court type of things. And then you have the spot where, because you have Curry going for the record tonight, maybe more public bettors would just kind of tend to gravitate in terms of the narrative, to gravitate towards the Warriors. So maybe there's even more value on the other side looking at the Knicks.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the record really had kind of an impact on how the Warriors played last night, and Steve Kerr admitted as much that Steph was, trying way too hard, thinking a little bit too much about the record, and that kind of affected his performance. He played terrible last night for the first 3 quarters, just turning the ball over, missing a ton of shots that he usually makes. So, yeah, I think that kind of narrative too kind of, maybe adds a bit of a distraction on the Warriors side. There's just kind of a lot on the plate that they're dealing with right now heading into this game that makes me like that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking right now at the FTN bets tool that we have for the odds page, looking at the games across the market, and only at a few books is a +5 out there. It's 4.5 primarily right now across the industry. Do you still like that line at 4.5?
Yeah, I do like it at 4.5 still. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic stuff. So any other game on this slate catch your eye, either from like a fan perspective, FAN, from a fan perspective, or a sports betting perspective?
Yeah, the Raptors Nets game. I mentioned the Nets got hit with protocols this morning. Paul Millsap was already in the protocols. They got LaMarcus Aldridge and a couple of their depth guys entering the protocols and out tonight. And big news is Kevin Durant. He's questionable with that sore ankle. So on that Raptors side, they're really only missing Precious Achiuwa. They've been out, OG's been out for a while, so that hasn't been that's not a new thing. But I think I would dabble on the Raptors +5 in this spot, just kind of trying to get ahead of the news potentially if KD ends up missing, because he is one of the best players in the league, and that line would move 2.5, 3 points, I think, at least if KD ends up being ruled out. So that's another place where I dabble and try to get in a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm. So they're +5 across the market, except at BetMGM where there's +5.5. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, +5.5 is great. I mean, like I said, I probably put like half a unit in right now just to get out ahead of it, just in case KD ends up being ruled out. I haven't got a ton of information on him just yet, but even if he isn't 100%, like that, this is a 2-man team as of now with KD and James Harden. So, and we saw, without KD the other night, James Harden back in Houston, they lost that game outright. So it'd be obviously a massive deal if KD ends up missing.
All right, I have a couple of questions going off script here, but kind of flowing from what you just mentioned. You talked about kind of the news of Warriors with the mechanical issues on their plane, and the Nets getting hit with protocol, and then Durant with the ankle issue. You are, I would say, like the unquestioned master of NBA news, and then thinking about news in actionable ways. But news this year feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it has been different than the type of news cycles that we have seen in previous seasons for the NBA. Can you talk a little bit about what we have seen in the news so far?
Yeah, well, I'll say off top, I think kind of we're getting news in advance more often this season. And a big reason because of that is the NBA is requiring teams to submit injury reports every hour this season. Last season, it was just 3 times a day. We get like a 1:30, a 5:30, and 8:30 injury report. We're getting it every hour, this year. So, especially over the last week, we're seeing news get out earlier than anticipated, which is great. And it also increases my edge, I'd say, because if the injury report's dropping every hour, I can kind of quickly access that and jump on news, right away. So, I think that's primarily, I think, the biggest difference I've seen so far this season. I would say the way I approach sports betting, I'm rarely trying to bet games straight up, and I'm always trying to look for different angles in terms of anticipating news before it's officially dropped. Looking at travel situations, rest disadvantages, advantages, and just kind of trying to pick out those edges. Because I think and I think it's definitely impacts different teams different ways too, because some teams are much better equipped with their depth to kind of make up for those situations and the rest disadvantages and things like that. And some teams are, it impacts them a lot more because they just don't have the depth to kind of make up for it. So I think you just kind of have to kind of take those injuries case by case, team by team, understand, players 8 to 11 on the depth chart rather than just the starters, and just kind of dig deep and figure out where the minutes will go, and then how that affects, their percentages of winning and all that.
So you mentioned Durant earlier and his ankle issue, and that might keep him out tonight. He's had a fantastic season so far. Even I, as the guy who doesn't follow NBA, especially when the NFL season is going, even I know that Durant is having a good season. And, that kind of leads to conversations of MVP, both in terms of like the basketball fan perspective of like, hey, who do you think should be MVP? But then the sports betting perspective of anyone in the market stand out to you as potentially offering some value right now in the MVP race?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's kind of just a two-man race to me at this point. I don't think there's a ton of value. I think Steph is pretty straightforward, should be the MVP. They're the best team in the league right now. He's the best player on the best team. I would say, just like from a numbers perspective, I'd argue that Nikola Jokic has been the most valuable player to this point. But the problem with Jokic in Denver is there's such a significant gap between what the Warriors will do as a team in terms of their record and what Denver will do as a team with their record. And a lot of this stuff with Denver is out of Jokic's hands. They have 3 max players on a contract, and 2 of them are out for the season, and Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. So Jokic is kind of on an island on his own, whereas Steph has Draymond and then Clay coming back in a couple of weeks, and obviously a really talented supporting cast too. So I don't think there's a ton of value out there, kind of go contrarian away from Steph. I think he's the significant favorite right now, and he should be in actuality.
Mm-hmm. What about rookie of the year? Anyone catch your eye in that market?
Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward too. I think it has to be Evan Mobley, and Evan Mobley, I cannot rave enough about how good he's been. I put out a tweet the other day. I think there's only 2 players 23 or younger I'd take over Evan Mobley moving forward, and that's Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum. I mean, Evan Mobley is legitimately a star, and I would take him over Zion Williamson. I would take him over LaMelo Ball. I would take him over John Moran. That's how good he's been, especially defensively. I mean, he's like, as a rookie, has a case to be on, first team all defense, second team all defense. That's how good he's been on that end of the floor, and we can really see it with how the Cavs have been as a team. Like, they've been by far the most impressive and surprising team to this point, and Evan Mobley has been a big part of that. I think we just got news now that a member of the Lakers tested positive for COVID. And yeah, Town Horn Tucker just entered protocols just now. They canceled practice. So that, kind of carrying over from our early conversation, that's another team that looks to be hit by the protocols. So yeah, I mean, we're just adding to the list at this point.
You mentioned Zion right there, that you would take Mobley over Zion Williamson. And I mean, I would say Williams' career has not gone as anyone, I wouldn't say anyone would have anticipated, but certainly not the way that he would have wished. It's been a small sample so far, but I mean, what do you think about what we will end up seeing out of him in the NBA? I'll just say I am hugely skeptical.
I am as well, but I think his environment has a lot to do with that as well. And I think it's just not going to work with him in New Orleans. If you look at the situation now, and if you're him, there really isn't any motivation or really any incentive for him to get back. What is he coming back to? Why would he rush his recovery? What is there to really play for? I mean, the Pelicans right now, 8-21, dead last in the West. You look at their team, Brandon Ingram is nowhere near good enough to be a number 2. No disrespect. He's a good player, but he just isn't that number 2 that you want that can really, push you deep into the playoffs, right? Their younger players, their core that was really supposed to step up this year has been hugely disappointing. Their young guys, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyra Lewis, Jackson Hayes, all those young guys have been really bad, really disappointing by their standards. We were expecting all of them to kind of take a leap. They haven't. I just think it's the writings on the wall for Zion and the Pelicans to kind of move on from each other. And, I just don't think it's tenable for him to bounce back and to kind of have the career that we kind of hope for in New Orleans. I think he needs a change of environment, and I think I feel like it's headed that way. And a lot of the talk has been that the two are kind of headed towards some sort of separation eventually.
That's amazing after the hype of last year. But what do you think is the reasonable best case scenario for his career at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still very reasonable for him to be one of the best players in the league. It's still really early to kind of say that's not in the realm of possibility anymore. I think a lot of it's kind of the injuries, and they're not career threatening injuries by any means, right? I think there's still paths for him to have a very highly productive career. I think the weight is something that he needs to address at some point, and something that Luka needs to address, as well. That's by his admission. And they're young kids. I think they'll figure it out. I think it's still too early to say that Zion's never going to be like a perennial all-star, one of the best players in the league. Obviously not off to the greatest start, but I think a change of scenery is going to benefit him a great deal.
Okay, Justin, this has been fantastic. A question here that I have to ask because I'm totally self-interested as a Mavericks fan. What do you think is going on with my team? Like Kristaps Porzingis, can he be a functional number two? Even if he is, are those two guys with Doncic and Porzingis, are they enough to get the Mavericks? I wouldn't say to the finals, but like deep into the playoffs. I'm skeptical, but What do you think?
No, I really don't think so. And you look at kind of the improvements they made in the offseason, just not nearly enough to move the needle. The roster hasn't really improved in a significant manner. And yeah, Kristaps has been inconsistent to say the least. I mean, he has stretches. He had a recent stretch where he played really well, and then stretches where he's, almost invisible and he disappears for long stretches, right? And with him, it's a lot of the physical wear and tear, the accumulation of those injuries where he cannot consistently be physically at his best for an extended stretch of time. So if you're in a 7-game series where you're playing, every other day, 35 minutes in high leverage situations, I can't expect him to be consistent and show up every single game. And that's a huge problem. And the rest of this roster, I think at center, they have a huge problem. They don't really have an answer there. They're like juggling between Dwight Powell, Kleba, Cauley Stein, Moses Brown, Boban. Like they just don't have, any real answer there. And yeah, I mean, we'll see about Jalen Brunson. I mean, Jalen Brunson has been, one of the most surprising and most impressive players on this roster this season to this point. But you look at that Clippers series, he could barely find the court in the playoffs last year. So I remain pretty skeptical of this Mavs team. I think they kind of have to wait it out until that Kristaps deal runs out, and then kind of have to reevaluate and see, and try to surround Luka with better talent. But like as is, I'm not buying it all.
All right, final question here. You mentioned Evan Mobley as a guy who really catches your eye. So maybe that will kind of dictate the direction you go with this question. But, we're always focused on what's happening this year, but I'm curious, teams in the future. Is there a team for next year in the NBA that you can kind of see as like, they're not there yet, but they're up and coming. And maybe if they get one more player, or maybe if the guys that they have take that next step forward, you can see them being a serious contender next season. Who is that team for you?
Yeah, I'd probably have to say the Hornets, just because I have so much faith in LaMelo. I think that team is really built well around him. I think they have enough in the East to kind of creep up into that 4 to 6 seed conversation. There's some other teams out there. I think Houston is like, 2 years away from being 2 years away. And maybe Oklahoma City is probably in that conversation as well, though they have a really nice core in Oklahoma City with SGA. I like Josh Giddey a lot. They have some nice pieces there. So, I would say realistically in the next season, the Hornets are probably my team to take that lead.
Okay, I lied. I said that was my final question, but you mentioned the Rockets. So I have to ask about them because they've gone on quite a run recently of winning games when I think that this team Again, we all know that I do not know basketball, but I've been told that this team sucks, and then they just win a whole bunch of games. What is happening with the Rockets?
I mean, don't give them too much credit. They play like Oklahoma City twice, Orlando, New Orleans. So it was a little bit like, schedule induced there. But yeah, I mean, they kind of got back to running a little bit more of a structured offense before they were starting two big men at Daniel Tice and Christian Wood. They kind of simplified it a little bit. Let's just run let's put Christian Wood at center, surround with more spacing. They'll run the Kevin Porter Jr., Christian Wood pick and roll and go from there. They kind of simplified it a little bit. I think they have, some good talent. I still think they're a bit of ways from kind of making any sort of leap as a team. It kind of changed. They lost a couple games recently, playing, against some better competition. So yeah, I think, they've shown some flashes, but do I think it's, legitimate long-term? I'm still a little bit skeptical there.
All right, Justin, really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the NBA today. I want to give you some opportunity to talk about Underdog, all of the stuff that you guys have going on there, any promos you guys are running, anything like that.
Yeah, I would say we just today launched a playoff best ball with $1 million prize pool. I would say go check that out. The best ball at Underdog is better than anybody in the industry. Would highly recommend that. And then we're still running the NBA newsfeed, Underdog _NBA. Go follow that account on Twitter for all your up-to-date news and alerts and notifications, lineup statuses, everything in between. So yeah, that's all I got for you. Not here to show too hard. Just happy to to stop by and talk some ball with you.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'll do a little bit of shilling though. Use the promo code FTN when you sign up for Underdog, and we will have the notes for exactly what that gets you in the show description. All right, Justin, awesome. You are a man among men when it comes to NBA news and NBA sports betting. Fantastic catching up with you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too, man.
All right, thanks, Justin. All right, that was good. That fantastic. Producer Tom, I don't know if your camera ready. If you planned on coming on. That was fantastic. Having Justin, I'm gonna give myself a little pat on the shoulder. Good job by me. Telling you to book him. Anything that Justin said before we get out of here, anything he said, catch your eye, or I should say, catch your ear, catch your attention. Whether it was today's 3-game slate, whether it was talking about the COVID protocols, futures, MVP discussion, anything.
I mean, twofold. Number one, I was going to take the Warriors 3, but that line's ballooned to 5 now. It opened at 3. And he made a very great point about the fact that they had mechanical issues. They're kind of thrown off right now. Gonna suck, but I could see the Knicks winning this game. It feels disgusting just to say, but I could see them winning the game where Curry breaks the record. I don't think it's going to happen, but 5 points is too much for me in this contest. But vastly more concerning to me is the COVID shutdown looming. I actually just saw a tweet from someone saying the news today has very March 2020 vibes, and I am not about it. Particularly because the last time this happened, I got laid off, but also, I mean, you look around the world right now, Bayern Munich's playing a game in Stuttgart and it looks like they're without fans. Europe has kind of been shutting down again. There's talks of the Premier League actually putting on a hiatus right now because there are multiple teams that are just getting ripped apart by it right now. Now it's transitioning over to the NBA. The Cleveland Browns just announced they have like 5 or 6 guys out on the protocol, including Jarvis Landry. It's concerning. We're not scientists here. I will say that the good news is it looks like with this new variant that it's more contagious, but it's less deadly, which is common for viruses. As they mutate, they evolve the ability to spread more easily at the cost of killing the host, which is, what the virus doesn't actually want to do because it wants to spread further. So that's good news. My hope is that this will be a short-term thing, that this will kind of sweep over for a little while and it'll just kind of pass. But we'll see. Again, not scientists here.
Yeah, I am known for being pessimistic, but I'm rather optimistic when it comes to this. And it's not so much that I'm optimistic like, hey, science is going to win or like what and anything like that, but it's more like my optimism is rooted in pessimism, in that I think these sports leagues will continue to find a way to patch things together so that they can make money. I think that will be the primary driver in all of this.
I'm in complete agreement with you on that. I think that we know too much at this point for this thing to really actually shut down the league. Like it's not like, especially at this point with the strains that we have going on, that it's particularly a danger to these players. They're not in the prime demographics that this virus likes to hit. They're all extremely, extremely fit people. My hope is that this time around the league won't be quite as cautious, maybe overly cautious, and just say, look, we'll figure it out. We'll deal with postponements. We'll deal with the schedule, but we're not shutting down again.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind that I can see postponements, right? You can see situations like that popping up, but where it's sort of piecemeal, as we saw with the NFL season last year, with the Steelers having games canceled, moved around, things like that.
Yeah.
I can see something like that happening across various sports leagues, but I would be surprised if we saw a major professional league shut down, postpone its season, for an indefinite period of time.
We also, I highly doubt that we'll have empty stadiums again. They're doing it in Europe. I don't see that happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I would if they had to do that, I would rather have them do that than cancel games. But yeah, I would be skeptical that they go that route as well. Okay, Tom, I think we're done here. Very informative show with Justin.
Indeed, we hit a lot of topics there. Great show. I hope people check it out. And where can they find all of the work that you're putting out each and every day?
You can find all of the content at FTN. On Friday, I published the Fantasy Football Breakdown. On Thursday, the Best Bets article. On Tuesday, the Fantasy Rankings, which I update on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then on Twitter, on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app, and on FTN, you can get daily episodes of the Freedman Fantasy Football Show and the Degenerate Sports Betting Show. And always use the highly original promo code Freedman for 20% off at FTN. All right, that is the show. You can find me and Tommy V on Twitter at Matt F. The Oracle and TV at Work. Thanks for joining us, and see you next episode.